Everyone's glazing Beowulf up, down, right, left, and center, man. Like, even the title of the poem is glazing him up. Like, what the hell? For those who don't know Beowulf, the poem is about Beowulf, the character slash warrior slash hero slash God's chosen one. The poem itself is broken up into several different parts, but the three main arcs that you need to be aware of are firstly the time when Beowulf go fights Grendel, secondly when Beowulf go fights Grendel's mother, and thirdly when Beowulf go fights the dragon. And spoilers, he wins against them all. Like, he basically killed everyone. But before I go on with the rest of the video, I want to make clear that this video isn't going to be a lecture about Beowulf, as in I won't actually give you historical context about the poem, what this poem means in the greater corpus of English literature, stuff like that. I won't be talking about it. Instead, treat this video as a sort of playful, tongue-in-cheek literary analysis of the poem that has given me emotional damage in my very first year of undergraduate studies. Years have passed since then, and I'm not afraid of this poem anymore. In fact, I want to make fun of it for how much it aura farms. And with that, let's get into it. The words aura farming and glazing will come up a lot in this video, and I want to properly define them for you here right now before moving forward. In simple terms, aura farming means doing things to look attractive to others, like you're trying to look cool. Meanwhile, glazing means you're excessively praising someone. The synonym that I can think of for glazing is dick riding. So you're saying shit like, oh, that's so cool, you're so strong, oh my gosh, wow. In fact, we get plenty of Beowulf glazing before we even meet the guy himself. This is how he's first mentioned. There was no one else like him alive. In his day, he was the mightiest man on earth, high-born and powerful. Crazy, huh? Like, who do you think you are, Whitebeard? You don't have a feet yet. But the glazing continues. Over dinner, some washed-up NPC named Unfirth, I did not pronounce that right, I'm sorry. But anyway, this NPC said to him that, oh, you're just smokes and mirrors, you're only doing this to aura farm or for sheer vanity, he says, and that there's no way you'll win against Grendel. And Beowulf was pissed. Like, just look at how much he yapped in response to clap back against this guy. Like, chill, you don't even have a feet yet, relax. But I did like this one part of the monologue where after he claims that he beats up some sea monsters, he describes the aftermath of it all as saying the creature's dead bodies slopped and floated on the ocean's surface, and that because of him, the sun of all things will rise for him, as indicated by the line, light came from the east. And then we have this religious imagery that implies that he thinks that he's God's chosen one by saying the sunlight represents a bright guarantee of God. And then by the end of the monologue, he sort of doubles down on that sunlight chosen one imagery here in this paragraph, where he conducts all his battles in the glory of the sun. In other words, this is just a lot of aura farming to say this is the world's greatest giga chat. Okay, so don't mess with him. But of course, what is a giga chat without his feats? And this is when he actually gets to fight Grendel. Does he win? Well, yeah, technically. But to me, I find it very hard to accept because it's an off-screen battle. We don't actually get any detail of the fight from the narrator. In fact, the narrator is pretty flippant about it. To describe the fight, the narrator uses a very strange phrase. The story goes. What do you mean the story goes? Weren't you narrating this whole poem as if you were there this whole time? Like, what's with the distance? What the hell? And then he sort of avoids describing the actual fight itself. The ferocity of Grendel and Beowulf's fight is described not through actual actions, but through the aftermath. Like how quote-unquote made benches were smashed and how the dining hall was essentially left in shambles. While I feel this sort of looks like fraud behavior, I believe the fight happens off-screen to sort of protect Beowulf's aura. At yet another dinner party, Beowulf very briefly recounts what happened during the fight, and he admits that he didn't have a very clear definitive win. Like, the fight wasn't as effortless as he hyped it up to be. Look at this passage here. Yeah, he won, but Grendel got away due to his incompetence. I know I'm being too hard on the guy because, like, he won, but also I was kind of expecting a more definitive KO, you know? But then again, he redeems himself later with Grendel's mother, and that's when things started to really look good for him. Grief-wrecked and ravenous, desperate for revenge, Grendel's mother charges into the palace and absolutely destroys the place. In the dead of night, she pounced and had taken one of the retainers and snatched the trophy, Grendel's bloodied hand. Apparently, while all this was going down, Beowulf was elsewhere. Does that mean bum behavior? Well, it looks that way. But at any rate, yes, Beowulf finally fights Grendel's mother on screen. Plus, he actually won. Sure, he fumbled a little bit at the start, but in the end, he won. He delivered the final blow, and to resolve some unfinished business, he once and for all cuts Grendel's head off to be paraded as a symbol, I guess. I don't know what the fuck they did to his head. All that being said, the thing I want to talk about though is the really long speech he gives when someone asked him to share what happened, because it's kind of weird. Okay, let me put my avatar away for a hot minute. Now, remember the time I told you that he fumbled a little bit with the fight with Grendel? Well, we don't get much acknowledgement for it beyond just a couple of lines, but somehow Beowulf managed to turn this admission of a blunder into pure aura forming. Although he got away to enjoy life's sweetness for a while longer, his right hand stayed behind him in Heorot, evidence of his miserable overthrow, as he dived into murk on the mere bottom. Let's unpack this a little bit here. Okay, so the first word, although, okay, this word fucking carries this little bit of monologue. It's saying that, yes, I messed up, but it doesn't matter. The word although like sort of frames the first part of the sentence before the first comma as a sort of stepping stone, a prologue before the thing that actually matters, which is everything else afterwards. Even if he didn't win now, okay, the fact that he survived this encounter with Grendel with real proof that this hellspawn can be hurt and therefore defeated is impressive, because at the time Grendel was killing everyone. Okay, Grendel killed tons of people for sport, so this hope meant everything to these people, and boy did they eat it up, like so much so that it actually changed his life. So this is another interesting thing that I want to talk about. Now, in my edition of the poem, the editor in the footnotes said that this is the first and only time that we actually get Beowulf lore. As sudden as that is, I think dropping this lore on us is actually a really great way to end this section off. The short of it is, Beowulf wasn't always this famous. Like, initially, he's literally just fodder. But because of his feats, and I quote, presently every affront to his deserving was reversed. Meaning, he proved himself and he beat all the fraud allegations. On the surface, like, good for you, Beowulf, for being this great rags to riches story. But the thing that matters to me the most is that all this fighting, all this aura farming, all this glazing and praise actually means something. Yes, he has a bit of an ego and a somewhat inflated self-image that's a bit cheesy, but all this fighting gives him confidence, recognition, and the chance to do something really fucking cool. If the poem didn't include like this little extra tidbit about his personal life, I would have just rolled my eyes at Beowulf, honestly. But now that I know that these feats actually had a purpose beyond, oh my god, I'm so fucking strong, it made me think that, like, you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting your name to mean something to people, that you want to be more than just someone else's father. Like, you gotta respect the hustle, man. That's actually pretty admirable. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle, will bear your lord away. Beowulf says all of this to his soldiers just before he runs off to slay the dragon that has been terrorizing and burning his kingdom. Unlike the first two battles with Grendel and his mother, we see that this fight is more sobering in the sense that after the 50-year time skip, we see Beowulf be more contemplative and more aware of his death and waning strength. Referring to the monologue I've just read, we notice a couple of interesting things. In order, firstly, he mentions worth. Now, before he fights Grendel, we have a couple of people, including Unferth, who were skeptical of him, or in a more hostile case, are trying to humble him. Before fighting Grendel's mother, a similar trend happens when a nobleman tests his courage by saying shit like, "Seek it, if you dare, and if you come back." Cut to the present day, no one is doubting Beowulf and his abilities anymore. But now that he realizes that he's no longer strong enough or in his prime to be that guy, he articulates the need to prove himself. He needs to re-earn the right to aura farm again, which is huge, right? Like back in the day, he would never say shit like that. Secondly, he gives this weird either or thing where he says he'll either win or die. This is huge because back then, when he aura farmed the hell out of a situation, he never once mentioned what happened if he won. Let's look at this passage here. He's saying this all smug, like, hey, if I die, okay, then we are all fucked, okay? If I die. He says this confidently because it is assumed that he will win. That once he wins, everything will be daijoubu. Hence, he need not explain himself. And yet, in his old age, the fact that his victory is merely a possibility and no longer a given means it's truly 50-50, like it could go either way. He himself isn't confident and therefore he can't inspire that same confidence in others. Not gonna lie, him being skeptical actually is peak aura to me. Like, at this point, things like aura farming are way beyond him now. He's fighting this dragon because it's the right thing to do. He has responsibilities and can no longer be obsessed only with aura farming or power. Because at the moment, what's most important is protecting your own people. I remember at the start of this video, I very casually said that Beowulf won against the dragon, which he did, okay. But it wasn't that easy. Like, it actually came with real consequences. He killed the dragon, yes, and it's evidenced by the line he dealt it a deadly wound by stabbing it in its flank, which is the area between the hip and rib area. Before that though, okay, the dragon actually got a hit on him by saying that the dragon clamped his sharp fangs into Beowulf's neck, and that wound turned out to poison him later on in battle. So yeah, Beowulf finally died. Though, being the true yapper that he is, Beowulf actually ordered a couple of things to be done before he died. So firstly, he gave a distant, relative named Wiglaf his armor because he charged in to try and help even when the father army ran away. And Beowulf calls this guy his son, okay? And second, okay, he ordered the construction of a huge memorial over the sea, something that will be called Beowulf's Barrow, so that everyone sailing past it will remember his name and therefore who he was. I've been edging you long enough. Every decent video essay should have a thesis statement, and here's mine. Aura farming is how strongmen cope with the inevitability of death, weakness, and losing. Possessing the naivete, that strength, helps you overcome the failings that make you human. Of course, you need the feats to back it up, but there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to become the stronger and more heroic version of yourself. And honestly, it's always satisfying to see your self-aggrandizing image become reality. Something I admire about this poem is the fact that, at the end of the third battle, it sort of questions what gives a great man meaning once he's no longer able to fight. For Beowulf, I suppose, it's the son who will continue the family name for one last hurrah. As he says, "You are the last of us, the only one left of the Wagentings." I am not pronouncing that right, I'm so sorry. "Fate set us away, sent my whole brave highborn clan to their final doom. Now I must follow them." The description here is kind of depressing if you think about it. It tells the story of a dying legacy, a dying bloodline, that beyond a certain point, the name Beowulf will no longer matter and will no longer hold resonance in daily life. We see this sort of fate play out in the dragon. The dragon too has a legacy, which is this like hordes upon hordes of treasure. That's why they fought to begin with, because someone from Beowulf's kingdom stole a piece of that treasure, and because the dragon is pissed, they fight. Yet when we actually analyze the stuff the dragon left behind, the treasure that Beowulf fought for, it doesn't actually help make people's lives better. The narrator describes the treasure as saying it's gold under gravel, gone to earth, as useless to men now as it ever was. In a way, this young man, this young squirt is similar, right? Like he's the last of the bloodline, and once he dies, everything is over. Everything that Beowulf built somehow doesn't really matter. And then I'm obliged to ask, like, what's the point of doing all of this, of seeking glory and fame, when none of that will really matter, when it's going to be futile anyway? Well, I guess the silver lining in this is that dying with the knowledge that you've created this sort of legacy for yourself gave him peace and comfort. And for all that it's worth, even though the treasure is corroded and destroyed, the dragon probably feels the same way. And perhaps that knowledge is enough. I suppose it's not like a hot take to say that everyone wants their life to mean something, that everyone wants their life to have purpose. And for these strong creatures, the strong men, aura forming is them defining the kind of life that they want to live. Even if your name and all that you have done fades to the memorials of history, as long as you died thinking that your life had purpose, that it had meaning, that you've achieved something that you're incredibly proud of, then that's more than enough, At any rate, that's all I have to say about this poem. Like, I really liked it. If you'll let me conclude with a very bad TLDR, Beowulf, throughout this poem, pursued glory and wished for nothing more than to be a great man. Hearing he's pleased and pleased with the life that he had led, fate has granted him this wish. It has immortalized him as the greatest of all time. Thank you for watching.